Hello, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoy this video. Hello, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Welcome to today's Critical Thought. Before we begin, thank you to 684 subscribers there on YouTube. Hope you're enjoying the content. When we hit 700, I got a little treat planned for everyone. So be sure to share everything with your friends and let people know. For today's Critical Thought, we are talking stealth gameplay. And honestly, that may not be the best screenshot for it, but don't worry, it will make sense in a few minutes. Stealth design is one of those terms that can mean a lot of things, depending upon the game and the designer we're talking about. I've played stealth games where I'm a teenage girl hiding from big monsters trying to kill me. I've played stealth games where I'm literally Batman stalking criminals from the shadows and picking them off one by one. I've played Metal Gear where I'm Solid Snake picking off bad guys from the shadows one by one. The point is that stealth design can mean any number of things depending upon the game that we're talking about. But regardless of the designer, game, series, whatever, there are three key elements that are the basis for any stealth gameplay that you can think of. And I mean every one imaginable. The first one is, what is the power of the player? And this refers to essentially the player's options and strength in the game. This is the one for game players, it's the most immediate thing. What can I do in this world? Do I have no means of defending myself? If I'm caught, am I instantly dead? Or if I'm noticed by a soldier, can I fight my way out? Can I handle these guys one-on-one, two-on-one? Can I jump into a group of 8 guys and kill them before they even get a chance to sound an alarm? The power of the player is a very tricky element to balance. You make the player too weak, and stealth can become very repetitive. Basically, I get spotted, game over, restart checkpoint. On the other hand, if I'm too powerful, then we don't have a stealth game. We have an action game that I'm just killing everyone before we even start fighting. And again, it's one of those things that depending upon what the game developer wants the player to do can mean any number of things. And the challenge with that, like with Shadows of Mordor, is again figuring out that balance and then building the game around it. If I'm going to be very weak and defenseless, then the enemies have to compensate for that. Likewise, if I'm all powerful, you also need to balance enemies around that as well. And enemy design we'll be coming back to in a few minutes. But with the player themselves, many game designers, especially those building their games around progression, tend to make stealth almost like its own progression mechanic. You start with maybe the ability to take down an enemy from behind. And then as the game evolves, you'll maybe learn aerial takedowns, or double, triple, quadruple takedowns, whatever. But you run the risk of, again, sending your balance off the deep end. If the player starts so weak that they can barely do anything, they may not stay around for the good stuff. But then if the good stuff is so freaking amazing, then stealth goes away. If I can literally pick off 10 guys from 50 feet that way with a super bow or super sniper attack, why should I bother sneaking up on them? Yeah. But we've seen examples of games that do a good job of balancing the player's power in different ways. Batman in the Arkham series is a good example. Batman is not going to be taken down by one person. Let's face it, that would send DC fans into a rage. So what the developers do is create different tiers of enemies. So the basic crook, Batman can beat up. It doesn't even matter if they see him coming. Batman's going to kick their ass. The gun-wielding goons, if they get the drop on Batman, you're in trouble. But if you can get to them first, you can easily handle them. And then as the groups escalate, so does the challenge. So it's less about being forced into different things and decide upon what can I effectively do, or what are my options here, and how do I exploit them. And, both Batman and Metal Gear are good examples of this. Both games give you a pretty wide variety of tricks and tools at your disposal. In Metal Gear, we've seen the active camouflage system, tranquilizer weapons, traps. The agility is a big point, and it basically lets the player define the engagement. And that is a very big point of what we see in more of the popular stealth games, where it's not just you are essentially stuck in a room and there's only two ways to get by it. It's more, I can do 5 things. How can I use this in this area to take out these guys without being seen? The Batman series have done a really good job of this with the Predator challenges, where you're basically in a room. It's almost like a stealth arena fight, now that I think about it. Many action games feature arena battles when you're stuck in a room and you're forced to fight. Batman features stealth arenas where you're forced to get through without being spotted or without being killed by overwhelming numbers. And then it's all about using these tricks at your disposal. So as Batman, I can throw a boomerang or a batarang that will distract a guy, letting me get in for a takedown. I can set up explosive gel traps on walls. If a guy's near a rail, I can use my grapple gun and pull him off. There's just a very wide variety there. And that variety helps to keep the stealth engaging. And it's one of the things that has helped the Metal Gear series as well. But let's talk about the second part, and probably as important as the player's power. What is the enemies? What am I going up against as these characters? Enemy design in a stealth game, it sounds very simple. If you don't want the player to engage aggressively, you make your enemies very powerful. But if you make them so powerful that the second you're spotted, you're dead, then stealth becomes very black and white. It's I stealth and win, or a guy sees me for half a second, it's game over. Game designers have always had trouble with balancing how they want stealth to go, and even the best stealth games tend to have trouble in this regard. Going back to the first point, it's really about balancing the enemy's power with the players. If the player's too powerful, the enemies are too weak. If the enemies are too powerful, the player's too weak. And again, it's all about what you want the player to feel or experience while you're playing the game. If I'm Batman, I'm not expecting 3 guys to take me on. If I'm Solid Snake sneaking into a military base, however, if I get spotted and there's 5 guys coming at me, I may be in trouble. Many games, as I said with Batman's example from a few minutes ago, tend to feature like tiers of enemies. So the basic thug or goon, it's not really stealth. They're nothing. They're, disposable guys. And then you go up in rank, and things get more and more dangerous. So now you have archers who have maybe further line of sight. Maybe super strong enemies who are immune to stealth. You can only kill them with a specific method. Or in Alien Isolation's case, you have a literal alien who cannot be killed by conventional weapons. So while you have the normal enemies at different tiers of escalations, you cannot fight that alien. With Shadows of Mordor up there, what they do with the Nemesis system, which that deserves its own critical thought and maybe its own examination video, so I don't want to talk too much about it. But what they do with your targets is the captains that you have to take on, they have different perks that are randomly assigned to them. So one guy may be invulnerable to stealth, so any stealth attack you try is not going to kill him. Another guy may have resistance to melee damage. In this case, you will be forced to use arrows to take them on. In this way, what the developers do is they force you to keep changing your tactics depending upon what the captain in question can do. And Batman did do some of that with the later enemies in the game. They threw in guys who could block your bat scan or your detective vision, or guys with they put like grenades or explosive devices on the gargoyles or stuff you could grapple up to, reducing your options. And when it comes to stealth design, again, it's all about that balance. But at the same time, the player should still have, I think, some kind of bag of tricks that they can use. Even if they can't fight, I think there should still be something, like a distraction. Maybe, pick up a book and throw it at, over there. Or, make a noise and then run the other way. when it becomes too binary, whether it's the player being all powerful and the enemy is weak, or the enemy is too powerful and the player is too weak, it makes stealth too binary. And again, it's very debatable about if games such as Batman Arkham Asylum or even the Assassin's Creed and Metal Gear could be considered stealth or true stealth in the same way as something like Amnesia or Haunting Ground or even Thief. Thief is another interesting example. You play a character who you have to make use of his intelligence rather than brute strength. So in a one-on-one fight, you can maybe win. Any more than that and you're essentially in deep trouble. And so a lot of that game is about using the environment and using tactics to avoid fighting. Deus Ex would be another good example, but Deus Ex Deus Ex Human Revolution also has kind of that issue with how powerful the player is. If you go full stealth in that game, you literally get a cloaking device. So it's hard to really feel like you're being stealthy when you can literally jump down, there's a group of 10, turn on your cloak, and then just, run straight for the door. But there is one final element of stealth, and if the other two are hard to balance, this one is probably the hardest. That is the means of detection. Every game will feature different means or different ways that the player is detected. Now in real life, there's there's actually 4, our senses. So, do you see me? Do you smell me? Do you hear me? Or, oh my goodness, my brain just went out. Hold on, I need to take a drink here. So, see, hear, smell, and then the obvious one, touch. Did you actually attack me? If you throw a rock at me, am I going to respond? And with the 4 of our senses there, the challenge of the game designer is how do I properly represent that in the game? And we see this in a lot of different titles. In Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, they use a camouflage system. So it was mainly based on visual and hearing detection. If I'm, running around, knocking on walls, or throwing stuff, the enemy's going to see that and hear it. If I'm 95% concealed, I can get very close to an enemy while I'm laying down and they won't notice me. If I'm standing there with, neon pink camouflage on in the middle of broad daylight, they're going to see me from further away. But then there are games that tend to focus on the other senses. In the Thief series, for instance, lighting is the big one. You're always given a little meter or a little symbol that represents if you're concealed by shadow. If you are, you're almost invisible to the enemy. But step in front of a light and they're going to spot you from a mile away. Many games use hearing, as I just said with Metal Gear, with running and all that. And with Shadows of Mordor, they actually use smell. Some of the characters will literally be able to smell you if you're too close and then come looking for you. But usually vision and hearing are the 2 biggies. And depending upon the games, many games will tend to either overplay or downplay certain elements of that. Even though visual is a big deal, some games may not allow you to control the lighting, or it will always be taking place in a bright room, so it's just more about simply line of sight. If I'm in the character's vision cone, like in Metal Gear Solid, they're going to see me. Now this is one of the hardest parts to balance, because it goes again back to the power between the player and the enemy. Can the enemy see me from, 5 miles that way? Can I literally get up into the enemy's face before a little detection meter fills up and the enemy will spot me? Again, this is one of those elements that it's really based on what the designer wants to do. Hitman, for instance, is all about essentially concealment in broad daylight. You're wearing costumes and disguises rather than doing Assassin's Creed jumping from roofs or Batman grappling. So while lighting is a big factor, so is the fact that if I'm wearing the proper disguise, as long as I'm not, running in people's faces, brandishing my gun, I'm going to be fine. But this is one of those topics that there really is no right or wrong way. The more means of detection you have, the more realistic and challenging it will become. And typically, we see games tend to go for 1 to 2 at minimum in terms of detection. So it could be sight and sound, could be lighting and sound, could be hearing and smell. Sometimes there are games where enemies are blind and they may only be able to sense your movement. There is that famous boss fight in Demon Souls where you're fighting a blind warrior. But we are getting really late into this critical thought, so we're going to wrap it up here. Again, with stealth design, 3 major aspects: what the player can do, what the enemy can do, and how the player is detected. And from those 3 points, you can build any and every kind of stealth game you can imagine. And we could talk about when stealth design fails, but that can easily be another 5 to 10 minutes. So maybe we'll say that for another critical thought. For you folks watching, here's my question for you today. What would be, now obviously we know great examples of stealth from Batman, Shadows of Mordor, Assassin's Creed, and of course Metal Gear. But my question for you, and this will probably be a part for the next critical thought coming real soon, what are some examples of when stealth doesn't work for you? When it becomes frustrating, or when even if you have these tools, you just don't want to be stealthy? So let me know in the comments below. One last thing, a little bit of administrative work. I've renamed the developer live play playlist to just simply building the game, because that's what they are. We are talking about a developer and how these games are made. So be sure to check that out, as well as my recent playthrough of Venture Forth with Jeremiah Ingham. It was a lot of fun, and we talked a lot about Metroidvania and roguelite design. It's important to make that distinction. Anyway, I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Thanks for watching today's Critical Thought, and I will see you all tomorrow with another one. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment, of course, share with your friends. It always helps out. Check out Game-Wisdom.com, where I examine the art and science of games. You can follow me on Twitch and Twitter under GW Bycer for the latest updates of new content. And be sure to check out our Patreon campaign. You can find us on Patreon under Game Wisdom if you would like to donate and help contribute to keeping Game Wisdom going. Your donations can not only give us the monthly funding we need to keep supporting ourselves, but if we can hit some goals, it will mean more great content for you, and there are some nifty little rewards there as well. Thanks for watching this video, and be sure to tune into the next one real soon.